Hey folks, and welcome back to another Division 2 video. In this video, I'm going to be going over my damage build I use for legendary difficulty, raids, or anything that requires some big damage. Let's jump into it. This is a build I use whenever it comes to doing some massive damage, which makes it ideal for legendaries or raids, with it having strong single shot damage and rapid fire damage combined with huge crits. But it is a build with a bit of an odd playstyle, which can take a little bit of getting used to, which means it's not for everyone. But it is definitely a build for players who are happy to adapt to a different way of playing in order to increase their DPS, or damage per second. In this video, I'm going to break down the build into its gear pieces, brands, attributes, talents, weapons, skills, specialization and the playstyle, and talk you through how it all works together. I'll also add chapters and timestamps to the video, just in case you want to refer back to any specific points later on. Let's start off by looking at the gear itself. For the mask on this build, I'm using a Providence Defense mask, which gives us 15% headshot damage for the one-piece Providence brand bonus. It's got weapon damage on the core attribute, and headshot damage and critical hit damage for the minor attributes. I also have critical hit damage in the mask's mod slot. For the chest piece, I'm using the named chest piece, the Pristine Example. This is an Araldi brand piece, but we won't be using a marksman rifle, so the brand bonus for this one does go to waste. But the damage increase we get for the perfect talent that comes with it more than makes up for it. Pristine Example comes with Perfect Focus. Increases total weapon damage by 6% every second you're aiming while scoped 8x or higher, up to 60%. Requires a scope with 8x magnification or higher. This means while we're looking down a scope with 8 times magnification, the damage builds up to an extra 60% total weapon damage, shown by an icon and a bar under your character's UI. That's where you'll find your armor and ammo information. We do need to be scoped in to take advantage of this extra damage, but we'll talk more about that when we move on to the weapons and the playstyle towards the end of the video. For the attributes on the chest, we have weapon damage as its core attribute, and critical hit damage and critical hit chance as the minor attributes. And just like with the mask, we have a critical hit damage mod in the mod slot. If you don't have the Pristine Example chest piece, this can be farmed from the open world by doing any of the chest piece or Araldi targeted loot. Or, as a substitute for now, you could use a Providence chest piece with a normal version of focus, which will still do good damage on crits while you're farming for the Pristine Example. The holster on this build is a Cheska holster, giving us 10% critical hit chance for the one-piece brand bonus. This is one of the most abundant amounts of crit chance on a single piece of gear, so it's always worth taking one piece of Cheska in any damage build. The core attribute is weapon damage, and the minor attributes are critical hit damage and critical hit chance. This means that one piece of Cheska with a good critical hit chance roll on the minor attribute gives us 16% critical hit chance on this one piece of gear. For the backpack, I'm using the named Providence backpack, the Gift. With it being another piece of the Providence brand, we get the second brand set bonus of 10% critical hit chance, with weapon damage as the core attribute, and critical hit chance and critical hit damage as the minor attributes. And just like with the mask and chest, in the mod slot we have more critical hit damage. The named backpack the Gift comes with Perfect Vigilance for its talent. Increases total weapon damage by 25%, taking damage disables this buff for 3 seconds. This is easily one of the best damage talents you can find on a backpack. The Gift backpack is a Dark Zone and PvP exclusive named piece of gear, and it can be farmed and extracted from the Dark Zone or found in conflict caches. But if your luck hasn't been great, or maybe PvP just isn't your thing, your best chance to try and grab one of these is through the named item caches. These can be found as rewards for some of the season activities, and when there's a global event live, you can actually buy these using the GE stars, or the global event stars, from the global event vendor. This is the best way to get them, because you can farm as many stars as you like as your character levels, then buy as many of these caches as you need. Unfortunately, it's just a case of waiting for the next global event to come round. But if you really don't get lucky, or you just don't want to wait to get them from these caches, you can use a normal Providence backpack with the normal version of Vigilance, with them not being too different and both giving you the same damage increase. There's only one difference between the perfect and normal version of Vigilance, and that's taking damage with perfect Vigilance disables the buff for 3 seconds, whereas with the normal version of Vigilance, it's 4 seconds, so they both still give you that 25% weapon damage, it's only the downtime on the buff that's different. For the gloves, I'm using a pair of Grupo gloves giving us 15% critical hit damage for the one-piece brand set bonus. For the core attribute, they have weapon damage, and critical hit damage and critical hit chance for the minor attributes. I know someone's going to ask, so the reason I'm not using Contractor's gloves for the damage to armor like most other damage builds is because I only really use this build for legendary missions or raid bosses. This means that a large amount of the enemies don't actually have armor, like the black or white tusk heavies, war dogs, or the murder wallies don't actually count as having armor, so damage to armor here is wasted. After testing quite a bit between the 8% damage to armor or the 15% critical hit damage, the crit damage is only slightly behind on damage to targets with armor, but not enough that you'd really notice. But on a target without armor, the damage was high enough to make it worth it, making the crit damage a lot more versatile against a larger range of targets. If you wanted, you could also change the brand from Grupo to Providence, with the Providence 3-piece brand set bonus also being 15% critical hit damage. But I tend to stick with Grupo because I don't always feel like looking down a scope, so sometimes I'll swap out the chest piece for the named Providence chest piece, the Sacrifice, which comes with perfect glass cannon for a bit of a change, so having 4 pieces of Providence is a waste of a brand set bonus. So having Grupo for me means I can swap out my chest piece and not have to worry about making a whole new build. On the knees, I'm using the named Overlord's Fox's Prayer knee pads. This is an easy no-brainer. The Fox's Prayer knee pads, instead of having a perfect talent, come with a unique attribute, which is damage to targets out of cover, a multiplicative damage type which is one of the biggest damage increases you can currently get on a build. Plus, for the one-piece brand bonus, we get 10% rifle damage, which will apply to the main weapon I always use for this build. If you'd like more information about multiplicative and additive damage, and the difference between them and how they work, check out my video talking about the subject here. I'll also link that in the description below. For the attributes on the Fox's Prayer knee pads, I have weapon damage as the core attribute, and critical hit damage as the other minor attribute, along with the fixed damage to targets out of cover. Now let's move on to the weapons. For the primary, I'm using what is still the hardest hitting rifle, the classic M1A. That comes with fixed rifle damage and critical hit damage, and I've also rolled damage to targets out of cover as the third attribute. For the talent, I'm using Rifleman. Landing headshots adds a stack of bonus 10% weapon damage for 5 seconds. Max stack is 5. Additional headshots refresh the duration. This means 5 headshots will give us an extra 50% weapon damage, which refreshes with every headshot, unless the buff times out. These also don't have to be kill shots, so a black or white tusk heavy's headshots will also build these stacks, which means for legendaries this is a fantastic damage buff if you can keep it active. For its mods, in the scope slot, I have the digital scope that you get from the sharpshooter specialization. This gives us 45% headshot damage at the cost of minus 5% critical hit damage. The underbarrel is the laser sight, giving us 5% critical hit chance, and the magazine slot is the tightly packed marksman's mag for an extra 5 rounds in the magazine. The secondary weapon is the FAMAS assault rifle, with assault rifle damage and damage to health as fixed attributes, and damage to targets out of cover rolled as the third attribute. For the talent, I have fast hands. Critical hits add a stack of 4% reload speed bonus, max stack is 40. With this build being very near to the crit hit chance hard cap of 60 with 59%, most hits landed are critical hits, giving the FAMAS a nearly instant reload, increasing its sustained DPS. This is mostly used for the robotics like the War Doggos or the Murder Wallies, with it having that extra damage to health, but it will also make short work of any enemies that get too close. For the mods on the FAMAS, I have the Flash Hider 5.56 on the muzzle for the 5% critical hit chance, the laser pointer on the underbarrel for 5% critical hit chance, the sturdy extended 5.56 magazine for the extra 20 rounds at the cost of minus 10% reload speed, which we won't really notice with the fast hands talent. And on the scope I have the CQB SS x8 scope, giving us an extra 30% headshot damage. I know this one seems a bit strange, having a zoomed in scope on an assault rifle, but this is so we can still take advantage of perfect focus on the chest piece, even when using the assault rifle. This does take a little bit of getting used to, but when you start getting the hang of it, it hits really hard. The pistol I'm using is Orbit, a Dark Zone and PvP exclusive revolver that comes with perfect finisher. Swapping from this weapon within 10 seconds of killing an enemy grants 35% critical hit chance and 40% critical hit damage for 15 seconds. With this build, the critical hit chance is wasted with it being nearly at the cap, but the 40% critical hit damage takes the build over 200% crit hit damage. Like with the gift backpack, you can get this pistol from the named item caches, but if you use a pistol of your choice with the normal finisher talent, it will give you a similar effect. You just get 5% less critical hit chance and 10% less critical hit damage. Finisher is a great talent for that enemy that's one small tap away from going down. Then, quickly switching from the pistol back to either the M1A or the FAMAS for a big damage boost. The mods for the pistol aren't too important, but on my Orbit I always use the speed loading revolver drum for the extra 20% reload speed, and I've got the EXPS3 hollow sight for 3% more headshot damage in the optics rail slot. For the skills in this build, in my first slot I've got the Crusader Shield. This is mainly to help us keep Vigilance up on the backpack. With Vigilance, taking damage removes your damage buff for a short time, but this only happens if your actual character takes the damage. If the shield takes the damage, you will keep the damage increase you gain from Vigilance. But be warned, on legendary missions it will feel like the shield is made of paper with us having 0 skill tier, but it does give you a few moments of grace before it goes down. The second skill slot is a bit more flexible and open to different skills if there's anything specific you need at the time, for example a Gemma Pulse for drones or robotics. I tend to keep the Revive Hive here as my default skill. This just means if anything does go wrong, the rest of your team doesn't need to put themselves in any kind of trouble or danger in order to get you back up. With this build, the specialization I'm using is the Sharpshooter, with the damage points in assault rifles, rifles, and pistols. I've gone Sharpshooter for a few different reasons. First, we get the extra 15% headshot damage for rifles. Next, we also get an extra 15% stability, which really helps when scoped in with the FAMAS. And finally, the flashbang grenades, which are a great form of personal crowd control, and ideal for keeping targets staying still in order to build stacks for riflemen and letting focus charge. For the overall attributes and stats for this build, it has 100% weapon damage, which with all of the buffs active on the M1A goes up to 235% weapon damage, an extra 40% rifle damage, and 15% assault rifle damage. With the classic M1A, we have 59% critical hit chance, 177% critical hit damage without finisher procced, and 165% headshot damage. And fully buffed, with a headshot crit on a heroic named enemy, it's hitting over 5.7 million, which is pretty good with 59% crit chance, and that's not including the extra buff we get from finisher. The FAMAS has a critical hit chance of 59%, 173% critical hit damage, and 130% headshot damage. And fully buffed headshot crits on a heroic named enemy hits just under 900,000 at 900 RPM, not including the buff from finisher. With the playstyle for this build, it's ideally used in a group. Not to say this build can't be used as a great solo build, it did carry me through Legendary District Union Arena solo, so it is doable. But you need to remember it's a damage build, so you will feel like you're made of glass with it having little to no self-heal or survivability. The most optimal way to play this build is to keep your shield up scoped in and stand behind cover to your left, hiding most of your shield. When the Crusader shield is active, it actually changes how your character's hitbox works, moving your weapon and sight to the right of your character. So if your shield is behind a wall on your left, just visible in your scope, you have your smallest possible hitbox, making it more difficult for the enemies to hit you. Also remember that 60% of your extra weapon damage is coming from perfect focused, so you want that charged before you go into a fight. You can do this by simply waiting a few moments scoped in, and let it build up before pushing into the enemy. You can take your finger off aim for a moment, zooming the camera out behind your character, that way you can quickly scope out the entire area for enemy positions. Or something you may have seen before is players moving a little bit like this. This is tapping aim down sight in order to keep perfect focus active as you move or look around. Also keep in mind finisher on your pistol, it can make a huge difference to your damage, and flashbangs can be a great setup if you see the enemy before they see you. And that's everything you need to know to put this build together and play it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and consider subscribing for more Division 2 or looter shooter content. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.